How you doing, folks? You're all very welcome to this evening's webinar, which is on the Assistant Inspector competition to join the Agricultural Inspector within the Department of Agriculture. My name is Bill Callanan, and it falls to me just to welcome you all. Delighted to see a very good turnout in terms of participation in this evening. And we're just reflecting on, if somebody is looking at a application, what would be of value in terms of an understanding of our role, our job requirements, a bit about career, and just sharing our own experience within the department. There are two parts to the overall piece this evening. One is I'm going to give three parts, I should say. One is I'll give a very brief overview in the beginning. Then we'll go to a presentation, and you have colleagues on the screen in front of you who are going to talk to the various elements of work that we're involved in within the inspectors. And then colleague Joe Sheridan will talk you through the application process. Just to remind people, the closing date is the 4th of May, 3 p.m. I can assure you from experience that it's a very hard deadline. It's something that cannot be missed, and there is once it's closed, that's the end of it in terms of operation of the process through the Public Appointment Service. Another question just in terms of running the webinar is that we have a question function, and I know many of you will have questions. Some of them might be quite technical at the end, so if you can, throughout the presentation, type them into the question box and we'll try to get through them at the end as much as we can. We're giving a time of about 45 minutes to an hour to just give an overall flavour. So I'm going to really crack on, and I was just reflecting on myself. I'm in the department now 26 years. And I suppose it has been a varied career. The inspectors within the department overall is about 4,000, close to 4,000 people. And there's a really wide and variety of work that many people, both in the industry and yourselves, wouldn't understand in terms of, or it wouldn't be front and center, but is actually critical to the sector in terms of operating, enabling, regulating, and exporting. So if you look at, typically we export to 180 countries, 90% of our food and drink, and worth up to 19 billion. But that's based on a structure of a Department of Agriculture which can satisfy the requirements in terms of safety, sustainability, all that work. So when I say enable and regulate, they're both done with the objective of supporting the industry and supporting government in terms of how it operates. So the department itself is split into various areas of work, which are administrative, veterinary, technical, laboratory expertise, and ourselves, the inspectors. And that really is around bringing the science of agriculture to bear in terms of government policy. And that's a mixture of supporting government in terms of the evidence on which policy is decided, bringing together policy opportunities or initiatives, and then government decides, and then we will implement that thereafter. And if you look at it, all areas of society and even areas that you're engaged in, be it sport, work on a framework of rules, and that's in our case legislation. So developing legislation and then implementing and enacting that is a critical function across the areas that we all work in. As I said, I have colleagues who are going to talk to the specific areas. But one thing binds us together. As civil servants, we work to a very strong ethical consideration in terms of the professionalism of our work, the ensuring that the honesty of that is critical, the transparency in terms of we're in a very democratic society where there's an expectation of professionalism, openness, transparency about that policy development, and the evidence that's put before government in terms of how it considers things. And I think that's critical for the expertise of the inspectors in terms of ensuring that we have the most accurate, the most up-to-date, the most consistent advice that's available. And we are doing this recruitment to ensure we have that capacity to provide to government and implement government policy. Just from my own perspective, I certainly, when I joined the department in 1996, didn't see myself in the current role. I suppose my career has evolved, and the key message for me is just to look at this as not just applying for a job, but rather a career. When I started, I worked in a place called Integrated Controls, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And at that time, I had everything from lean meat indexing of sheep as part of a sheep breed program to, I suppose, the ensuring bulls that were going into Tully Test Centre at the time were okay and sound in every measure before they're going into the test system, ensuring that we had a control system to oversee and I suppose support the payments on the likes of sheep schemes, on special beef premium at that time, suckler premium, etc. Moving from that, then I went into management services for a period, and that was looking at, well, look at how does the department structure its work and how does it I suppose deliver on its mandate, because there's always pressures in terms of the demands, what's expected of us versus the resource allocation. I've spent a period of time in the appeals office, and that was really adjudicating in relation to appellants who were not happy with department service or decisions, and you're independently considering, is there validity in their case? Everybody knows today of the appeals system, but at that time it was quite in its infancy, has grown in importance. Then I moved to head of nitrates, responsibility for all the areas of derogation of nitrates, water quality, biodiversity, and I spent 5 or 6 years in that. I had responsibility for issues like the fodder scheme when it was introduced, and bringing that forward, and finally to the current job, and I'm in that 6 or 7 years. So really what I want to convey is, I suppose it's just the breadth of roles, and it was certainly said to me when I joined, that it was important that I considered various areas of the department to just build my own skill base. So I think if anybody's coming at this, whether out of college or working in other areas, I had worked in industry, I had worked in Teagasc before I joined, so I had a broad background, and I'm sure many of you there on the call will share that experience. So I think that's our ambition this evening. So it's just an open conversation where we're trying to explain what we do. So Louise is going to share a presentation, and we'll just run through that. So I remind you again, put a few questions into the question box, and at the end we'll try and do it and be finished within the hour. Okay, Louise, can you share the presentation, please? Okay, so I'm going to start off just talking about the career. So going on to the next slide, if we look at the slideshow.
Just bear with me, I have to hide everybody. Who's talking? And here we go.
Anything I've left out, folks, in terms of the opening, or is there anything that I missed in terms of just some messages?
No, I think you're fine. Just to say, look, there's a number of questions regarding eligibility already, and I've posted an answer to say that we will deal with, there have been a number of queries regarding eligibility, and we do want people to send any queries they have regarding eligibility to competitions@agriculture.gov.ie. And it's that detail is on the slides as well, which we will post, rather than dealing with individual eligibility questions during this webinar. Okay, so
Perfect.
So Bill, you just tell me to drive on, and I'll drive on.
Yeah, you can drive on. So who are we? The Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. We're the oldest department in the civil service, and it actually goes back longer than the state, because it was set up, and agriculture was such a critical element of Ireland at the time. The Department of Agriculture was the first and oldest department in the civil service. We're close to 4,000 staff, 300 in the Agricultural Inspectorate. The structure of that is I'm head of profession and chief inspector. You've just heard Louise Byrne, who's deputy chief. We have senior inspector then who are responsible for sectoral areas, agricultural inspector, and then assistant inspector. So there's a career progression within the department that people can, I suppose, carve out depending on their experience and skill set. We aim to be a very competent and professional organisation. That's something that's critical for me, in terms of it's a professional inspectorate, so ensuring the competence and skill set is the most up to date it can is critical. We support the vision of a sustainable, innovative and competitive sector, And our values, as I mentioned at the beginning, is the service we provide, the quality of our people, operational excellence, supporting government in relation to enabling and regulating the sector. Go ahead. Key elements, it's a career path, not just a role. So there's quite a variety of areas. My background light has just turned off, apologies. We have light-saving technology here, but mobility is important. So after, I need to ensure that people have an ingrained expertise, but there is opportunity for mobility. And certainly after a period, it's always, I think it's very positive and good for a career, for your own, I suppose, development that people have and are exposed to different work areas. We have learning and development opportunities. So we have funding of academic fees. So if somebody wants to do ongoing academic training, there's opportunities in relation to that aligned with what are our objectives and business needs. But we can do specialist training, funding, and also mentoring. So there's capacity as you progress to engage with somebody on a one-to-one level who's more senior to, I suppose, share the wisdom of experiences in terms of how the department works. Secondment opportunities, both in other government departments, but also as agricultural attaches. Quite a number of the inspectors have gone abroad for a period, whether it's the EU, whether it's as an attaché, and engaging and coming back then after generally a 4 or 5 year stint abroad of looking at how we support the industry. Go ahead. So divisions, okay, this is just examples, right? So I can't possibly deal with the total number of divisions with the department, but these are where we would have a lot of inspectors, and I actually have responsibility on environmental policy lead for the department, and one of those divisions under my remit is climate change and bioenergy. So we all know the importance and critical importance of delivering the ambition in terms of a climate resilient sector, and that it contributes to the overall government objective of a 51% reduction. But how does it do that? How do you implement and support actions that are positive? So over on the right hand side, you see a picture of low emission slurry. So through a combination, just by way of example, of regulation, which is requiring some farmers to apply manures through low emission equipment, combined with support for other farmers through the likes of an acre scheme, or capital grants for machinery in terms of implementation, or working with industry, where increasingly industry are trying to achieve the sustainability objectives for their product. So we would engage across those 3 pillars: support, regulation, and industry, in terms of, I suppose, progressing the industry in terms of the implementation of equipment or opportunities such as low emission. But there has to be a rationale and a reason, and that's where the inspectorate would populate that logic for government in terms of why we're driving in a certain direction. Adaptation, we've delivered an adaptation plan for the sector, identifying, well, how does the sector deal with the likes of fodder crisis that we've had a couple of times, issues such as change in climate impacting in terms of what's happening at farm level, how we improve our air quality. So ammonia emissions are a big issue for the sector. It's a critical thing for society at large that agriculture is compliant with the requirements in that. And there's opportunities again within renewable energy, such as everybody will know, for example, in Thames, we now support rooftop solar, and I also head up a biomethane strategy. In other words, how do we develop an AD industry in the country? Go ahead. Nitrates and biodiversity. Look at this as the coalface of water quality here, in particular in relation to nitrates. So everybody knows we have an action program. A lot of you would be exposed to that. We would support Department of Housing, who are lead, but we also then implement the derogation. So the evidence that supports that, the policy that works with industry in terms of how do we ensure the agriculture sector is going to live up to the commitments and the expectations of society at large, and at the same time deliver water quality, but in a socially, economically financially sustainable way. On biodiversity, everybody knows, look, we've recently had a citizens' assembly. It has a number of recommendations, and it would fall to us to progress those recommendations in terms of policy support to what's been asked by society at large, including the farming sector. Okay, go ahead, please. Integrated controls, I said I worked in this in the very beginning. We have a number of inspectors there, so integrated controls really is around compliance in terms of basic payments and the new BIS scheme. But the key message I'd like to give here is that when we do controls, they're there with the objective of effectively supporting the finance and the objectives that have been set out. So we have a CAP strategic plan. It sets out what are the objectives of the next CAP period. There are many and multitude, and breaking from that, schemes are designed to support those objectives. And given the amount of expenditure, and remember, we would spend close to 2 billion across all our schemes and supports, you have to have a control mechanism to ensure it does as is expected of it. And the inspector would be front and center in terms of planning and organizing and implementing that control. And you'll see the evolution over the last couple of years from on-farm to now being high in the sky, etc. And the inspector would be front and center in that. Go ahead, please. I think I've done this, which is we're contributing. Economics and planning. I'm handing over now, I think, to Louise, if I'm not mistaken.
Thanks very much, Bill. So Economics and Planning Division is located in Agriculture House. It's headquartered in Agriculture House. It is primarily a policy division, very much looking at the economics and policy around agriculture, and they were key to developing agri-food and food systems policy. And I suppose the main policy at the moment is the Food Vision 2030. And that division has an assistant agricultural inspector and an inspector in it, and they're responsible for implementing and reporting on the Food Vision 2030 strategy. It's a very ambitious strategy. It's centred around the 3 pillars of environmental, economic and social sustainability. And Carl Walsh, who's a senior inspector now in Research and Codex Division, was centrally involved in crafting that strategy. It was a stakeholder-led strategy for the sector, by the sector. So that's just a brief on that. In terms of crop policy evaluation and certification division, its headquarters is in Back Weston Farm in Leixlip. We have a number of department farms all over the country. We have staff located in other locations also in Kildalton Agricultural College, in Kilkenny, in Ballydown, in Kilworth in County Cork, in Athenry in Galway, and we are up in the Tops Potato Centre up in Raphoe in County Donegal. It is a policy and an operations division, and they're very much involved in policy for the sustainable development of the tillage sector. They attend meetings internationally, and at an EU level they're responsible for the seed certification schemes, for the National Crop Variety Evaluation Programme, and have significant engagement with the sector on those schemes and programmes. They grant the plant breeders rights for new crop varieties. They are the national policy lead on genetic resources. And as you know, we have a junior minister now with responsibility for research, new market development, but also farm safety. And this division also leads on farm safety, health and well-being, which is a very important topic at the moment. I'm handing over now to Carl Walsh, who's Senior Inspector in Research and Codex Division. So over to you, Carl.
Okay, thanks Louise, and good evening everyone. So Research and Codex Division, we are based in Agriculture House, as Louise has said. Effectively, our mission is to lead and support Irish research across agriculture, food, forestry, and the bioeconomy. So on the next slide, I'm just going to go down into a little bit of detail on this. So In a bit more detail, our role is to fund public good research across those areas of agriculture, food, forestry, and bioeconomy. So we have 5 funding instruments by which we do that. The first one is referred to as a thematic research funding instrument. That's how we fund most of the research, and we run those calls about every second year with an associated budget of 20 to 30 million euro. We have an international funding strand that gets us involved with the Horizon Europe programme run by the European Union, but we've also got dedicated international collaborations such as the US-Ireland R&D partnership, and a new one we started last year with New Zealand around agriculture and climate change research. A third strand is around strategic studies. So this is where we essentially fund research projects that address policy, legislative and strategic issues of concern to the department itself. We also get involved in industry co-funding, and we've also got a coordination and support strand. After that, the core of all of those really is running competitive research calls. So the AAI in the division would be very involved in this, inputting into the specification of those calls. And to do that, you need to be familiar with policy and strategic challenges facing the sector, and also the scientific scope for those and scientific opportunities for those. And in order to be in a position to do that, it's necessary to keep your scientific skills updated, but there are also good opportunities to travel. The AAIs would often travel to meetings in Brussels and elsewhere in Europe, attending scientific conferences and representing the division at European meetings that are focused on specific research areas. There's also a necessity then to be familiar with aspects of conducting research, because the AAI would be centrally involved in assessing or overseeing the assessment of research proposals, but also in assessing the scientific progress of that research to make sure that it's doing what we were asking the researchers to do in the first instance. And then another very interesting aspect of it is being involved in the dissemination of the research findings. This is a really important one. So here you would be involved in organizing webinars, midterm project webinars, end of project webinars with the researchers and relevant people within the department and across the sector, and other dissemination events. Another aspect of the job is being involved in research and innovation policy. So the department sets the policy for research and innovation as it pertains to the agri-food sector, but we've also got a strong involvement in sector representation in interdepartmental committees around research and innovation, and aspects to do with things like research assessment, attracting more people into research, aspects of research such as stipends and so on. An important final aspect here is in relation to the bioeconomy. So for anyone that doesn't know, this is the production and utilization of bio-based materials in order to have better, more sustainable solutions for the sector. So it's a new way of utilizing bioresources, and we are the co-lead for policy in that area with our colleagues in the Department of Environment and Climate Change. We also fund research, testing and demonstration in that area. And the last part of the division then is we act as the coordination and the national contact point for the Codex Alimentarius Commission. So that's an international body under the aegis of the Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization that sets international food safety standards. And as I said, we coordinate Ireland's involvement in that. So that's a snapshot of what we do. I'll hand back to you now, Louise.
Thanks, Carl. So Seamus, I'm going to ask you to speak about Organics and Market Supports Division down in Johnstown Castle in Wexford, please. Thanks. Seamus Barron, handing over to you.
Okay, thank you, Louise. So I work in the Organic Unit in Johnstown Castle in Wexford. We're the competent authority for organics. The Organic Unit consists of the admin and the inspectorate functions. It's a busy area. The organic area has grown significantly in recent times. It's doubled in in the past year, and there's ambitious targets to continue to grow the sector over coming years. Under the Climate Action Plan, the target is to increase the area to 10% by 2030. So briefly, the responsibilities of the organic unit include administering schemes such as the Organic Farm Scheme, which is a very important scheme to support organic farmers. It includes policy to drive the development of the sector. It includes controls such as OCB, Organic Control Body Supervision. We delegate OCBs to certify and to inspect organic operators. Controls also include pertain to controls over imports, retail, and the schemes such as the organic farm schemes. We have a role to play in legislation. Bill mentioned legislation in his talk there. So we have a major role to play in developing and implementing legislation. We deal with the Commission on an ongoing basis. We have meetings every 2 months, consisting of 2 to 3 days meetings every 2 months with the Commission. And I suppose the other important area is liaison with stakeholders. So the inspectorate has a major role to play in all the areas that I've mentioned, and it has full responsibility for controls to ensure that operators, organic operators at all levels, to ensure that they're complying with all the organic legislative requirements. So that's an overview. Louise, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks very much, Seamus. So moving on to livestock breeding, production and trade division. So I don't see Tom in, so I'm going to cover off this. So Tom Keating is the Senior Inspector in livestock breeding, production and trade division. The headquarters is in Portlaoise. It is a policy and operations division, very much involved in the space of kind of genetic improvements in the bovine, ovine, national herd and flock respectively. Significant engagement with the ICBF and Sheep Ireland, and at the forefront in terms of developing policy in relation to livestock breeding, both at an EU level. There's EU zootechnical meetings, and nationally in terms of, you know, various schemes that have been developed over the recent past, like the beef genomics scheme, etc. They have a significant engagement with the equine sector, and do support the sector, in particular the sport horse sector, very much involved in beef carcass classification as well. And they monitor and evaluate beef carcass classification, and there's always a significant interest in that. They have to meet responsibilities in terms of beef market price reporting and audits. And they're very much involved in the conservation of rare breeds, feeding into other areas of the department and into genetic resources schemes. They have a particular role in relation to ICBF, and Bill is our department's rep on that board as well. So that's livestock breeding, production and trade at a kind of a fleeting overview, but there's a hell of a lot more to that division and other divisions, but I'm not going to dwell too long, if that's okay. So moving on to pesticide registration and controls division, we're joined on the line by Aidan Moody, who's actually head of pesticides registration division, and I'm also joined by Donal Lynch from pesticide control division. He reports to Anne-Marie Dillon, who's the head of that division. So I'm going to hand over to Donal, because the primary functions of AAIs are in the pesticide control division as an AAI general. So although there are some in registration division as well, so maybe Aidan, you might want to come in, but I'll hand over to Donal first, please.
Yes, thanks, Louise, and good evening, everybody. Yeah, we're the pesticide registration and control divisions are two divisions that are headquartered in Backweston, and I suppose we have responsibility for the regulation of pesticides in Ireland. I suppose the pesticide legislation is all driven by overarching EU legislation. And when we talk about pesticides, we talk in two broad areas. So plant protection products, insofar as what most people would, I suppose, typically consider pesticides, so your herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, and that sort of thing that's used on crops and in grassland. But we also have responsibility for the registration of biocides as well, which so the biocides encompasses 21 different product types. So that ranges from everything from hand sanitizers to wood preservatives to preservatives used in aircraft fuel, to rodenticides, the whole way to embalming and taxidermy fluids. So it's quite a broad category of products that we deal with and have responsibility for registration of. I suppose we're involved because it's an overarching EU regulatory system. We're quite involved, and our AAIs will be quite involved in, I suppose, the forming of policy at EU level and the direction of travel with the regulations and where they're going. So we take part in a number of different working groups at EU level. And I suppose in terms of that, our assistant inspectors would get the chance to travel to Brussels to take part in those meetings, and also to other relevant events across the EU. Within the division also, like, we have responsibility for, I suppose, the enforcement end of things as well, on the placing on the market of the plant protection products and biocides. So we carry out inspections in wholesalers and retailers where the products are being sold, to ensure that they're actually complying with the terms of the registration. We'd also have some dealings with cross compliance. So I suppose what were the SMR 9 and 10s in terms of with your farm inspections, so we would have a responsibility there. And we also would carry out inspection on other end users of pesticides, so the likes of your golf courses, landscapers, and other people that wouldn't be coming in under the integrated controls part of it. We also have a role in residue monitoring and food safety, so we would take samples of food that's placed on the Irish market and bring them into the laboratory and test them for the levels of residue that show up in that might be there in them. So I suppose in terms of our day-to-day work, we would have daily interaction with everything from multinational companies, so the companies that are placing the products on the market, to SMEs at both Irish level and at EU and foreign SMEs, the pest control industry, advisory services, and like a huge range of stakeholders. So that's just a very quick snapshot of what we do. As you can see, it's quite a broad range of activities we're involved in. And I suppose when I joined the department as an assistant inspector, I didn't think that I would end up having responsibility for registration of hand sanitizers, and especially in the past couple of years we had. So yeah, that's it for me. So I'll hand back to Louise. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Donal. Thank you. Aidan, do you want to say a few words, or you're happy that Donal is sufficiently covered just in terms of the registration division?
I'll just say something very quickly, Louise, if that's okay, in relation to the registration side. So in the pesticide registration division, we look at what happens before pesticide products get on the market. So we evaluate and assess applications for plant protection products and biocidal products to be placed on the market. And as part of that process, we have to look at the efficacy of the products. In other words, that they do what they say on the label. And that's where the general AAI role comes into the pesticide registration side. So we have some AAI general roles in pesticide registration division, looking at efficacy, and that involves assessing technical information in dossiers submitted by the applicants to establish that the product does what it says, that the application rate is sufficient to achieve the control of the pest, but no more than that. So it's looking at that it's the minimum required to do the job. The role also involves interaction with a wide variety of stakeholders, both at national level and also at international level, for example, with EPO, the European and Mediterranean Plant Protection Organization. And there's also very close cooperation with our colleagues in Pesticide Control Division. So I'll leave it at that and hand back to you, Louise.
Thanks very much, Aidan. And moving on then, I'm going to ask Sheila Nolan, who's head of Feedingstuffs, Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry Division, to present on her division, please. Thanks, Sheila, over to you.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, so as everyone has said, I'm the head of Feedingstuffs, Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry Division, which is a big mix of 3 sections really. There's the feedingstuffs, obviously the animal feed, fertiliser and poultry. And within that, there's about 52 people within the division. And in terms of AAIs, we have 1 AAI in fertiliser who's due to speak to you during this presentation tonight, Colin, so hopefully he'll say all very nice things about working here. And then we have 2 AAIs working in poultry, and then 5 working in the animal feeds section. And in terms of what we do, as everyone has said, we're a policy and operations division. And what that really means is there are some parts of the job that involve maybe looking at the legislation and drafting legislation and putting that in place, and other parts where you are out doing inspections, the typical job that we would associate with an inspector. So going out and doing inspections, whether that's on animal feed or on fertiliser or on poultry. So in terms of that, as I said, some people will be negotiating the policy and attending standing committee meetings to do that. And there's an opportunity for assistant agricultural inspectors to attend those types of meetings. But I suppose the main focus of the work is really to ensure that both the animal feed and poultry, which really the poultry meat and eggs do not present a risk to the food chain. And animal feed is very important in terms of being the start of the food chain. So it's a really important job that an assistant inspector would do, verifying that the controls that the feed businesses put in place. We also facilitate exports of both animal feed and eggs, and about 1,500 export certs were issued for feed last year, and a significant number for eggs as well. I don't have that number to hand, but we also, as I said, work with industry stakeholders, and there's a lot of those across the 3 sectors, and providing advice and support to senior management and to the minister. So I think that's kind of the division in a nutshell, but Colin is going to fill you in with more and tell you it is the best division to come to work with. So when you are filling in your application, make sure that you come to work in Feedingstuffs.
Well, they don't get to pick which division, that's another thing. But anyway, the main thing from Sheila's point of view is that Feedingstuffs, Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry Division, the headquarters is Selbridge in Kildare, where the vast majority of the staff are located, but they do have some regionally based AAIs in Cavan and Cork. Isn't that correct, Sheila?
Yeah, just 1 in Cork and 1 in Cavan, which are currently filled at the moment, just to say.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So moving on then to AES, Agriculture and Environmental Structures Division, and John Muldowney, if you can give us an overview of your division, please.
Okay, thanks, Louise, and good evening, everyone. Again, as Louise said, I work in the Agriculture and Environmental Structures Division. Our headquarters is based down in Johnstown Castle in Wexford, where we have a small core of staff down there. And then nationwide, we have 7 regions with 16 offices, and that's where the bulk of our staff are based. And there's probably nearly 50 staff based across the regions in terms of work in our division. So primarily, I guess, we're an operations division. So we're delivering, our key scheme that we're delivering presently is the ACRE scheme, the Agri-Climate Rural Environment scheme. So we're supporting the delivery of environmental goals around water quality, climate, biodiversity through this scheme. And we're also supporting then the capital investment scheme in Ireland called TAMS. targeted agricultural modernisation scheme. So as an inspector in the division, you'd be involved then in the design of the elements that we support and I guess the costings that are around those as well. And overall then, on top of this, we're trying to ensure the protection of public funds. Taxpayer funds are, I suppose, a key part of what we're delivering out here. So the acre scheme, it's a 1.5 billion euro scheme. So as you can imagine, it's critically important that we have systems in place that ensure monies are delivered for the actions that a farmer says they're going to provide, and then that we have a system around that to ensure that that's delivered on the ground. We have an evidence trail that's there to ensure that agriculture, or the Department of Agriculture, can maintain its status as a paying agency. Next slide. So what does this involve? Overall, I guess we engage with an awful lot of divisions across the department itself, from nitrates division, climate division, crop policy division, and we're trying to translate the policy needs that are there at their level, together with the food vision itself, 2030, to try and provide the supports necessary to allow farmers to transition to a more sustainable form of food production. And acres and TAMs are a core element of that. Then in terms of the headquarters side, we're developing the policy of operations to try and ensure a standard uniform system of delivery across all farmers across the country. I suppose it's to ensure fairness and transparency of what we do, that it's seen as being credible, that if farmers have a problem, they can see that we're following equal rules for everyone and there's systems in place for that. And as I said then, overall, it's a translation of the environmental policy into the farm level supports and needs that are there. In terms of the regions then, overall, it's the delivery of the inspections at ground level. It comes up into big figures. We have 46,000 acres participants at the moment, so there'll be a need to deliver nearly 2,500 inspections in acres alone. Then in terms of nitrates division, we provide nitrate derogation inspections. So 7,000 applications for nitrate derogation equates to 700 nitrate derogation inspections. And then on the organic side, as Seamus highlighted, in organics, it's a growing area. So at the moment, we have about 110 farm inspections there. And again, the key aspect here is there's increasing complexity and regulatory requirement around these, and it's your job as a AAI to ensure that we're meeting all those regulatory requirements. And then overall, you can imagine, because there's such an amount of money, we have to service the various EU and national audits to ensure that we have the systems in place that are appropriate to safeguarding taxpayers' money in the delivery of these environmental goals. I'll leave it with that.
That's great. Thanks very much. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to drive on. I have Deirdre Fay, who's Head of Horticulture and Plant Health Division. So I'll hand over to you, Deirdre, please.
Thanks very much, Louise, and good evening, everyone. Delighted to see so many attendees here tonight. I'm the Senior Inspector in the Horticulture and Plant Health Division. The division is headquartered in Backweston, and then it has a number of regional locations across the country. We're both a policy and operations division. So there's three pillars in the division: horticulture, plant health, and also a food safety element with respect to horticultural produce. In terms of the policy, it's really the work of the division contributes to the development of EU policy and legislation, and also servicing meetings. So there's an opportunity for attendance at EU and international meetings. In terms of the plant health pillar of the division, the work really is involved in defending our national plant health status and to minimise the threat posed by plants by the potential introduction and establishment of plant pests and diseases. The work of the plant health element of the division also facilitates trade in Irish plant products, and also we carry out plant health surveillance. We work closely with our key stakeholders in respect of plant health as well. The second pillar of the division relates to horticulture sector policy and supports, and the operational administration of supports to the horticulture sector. So we have a national, we have a horticultural grant aid scheme, and we also then funds are administered via the producer organisation scheme, which are EU funds that are administered via the Horticulture and Plant Health Division, and thus we provide a range of supports to the sector. We also roll out the National Apiculture Programme, which provides support for beekeeping. And we're also involved in carrying out official controls on horticulture produce and honey, thus safeguarding the food chain and protecting public health. I mentioned representation at EU and international meetings. So the work of the division and gives scope for assistant agricultural inspectors to attend these meetings and represent Ireland. And also, I suppose I'd just like to say that there are opportunities for on-the-job learning and also for via more formal training courses. And I know Bill mentioned this earlier in the introductory remarks. The work of the division as well, I suppose there's over 70 people working in the division, and there's currently 17 assistant agricultural inspectors working in the division, and we do have Joe McNamara online as well, who's going to speak to his experience working as a AAI in the division. So we look forward to hearing from Joe as the work goes on. So that kind of captures in a nutshell the work of the Horticulture and Plant Health Division, and I'll pass you back to Louise now. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Deirdre. So an AAI view. So I'm delighted to be joined this evening by two assistant inspectors. I'm going to go straight to Joe McNamara, who's now in Horticulture and Plant Health Division. Just to maybe speak for a minute or two about your experience, you know, from when you joined the department to where you're now. And then I'll hand over to Colin Murtha, who's in Feeding Stuffs, Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry. So Joe, if you can jump on your camera, please.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Louise. I joined the Department of Agriculture in 2019 as Assistant Agriculture Inspector in Import Control Operations Division in Dublin Port. And at that time, 2019-2020, I was a plant health inspector, but my role was mainly focused on Brexit preparation. So I got to participate in working groups coordinating with other state agencies such as the Revenue, HSC, OPW, and also we got to engage with DEFRA and also other trade representative bodies in order to try and acclimatise efforts and get ready for Brexit. We had to feed into working groups to do with trade analysis, so we could try and predict the levels of staffing and infrastructure we would require. We had to roll out IT projects in coordination with revenue, test these systems. We had to bring in new staff, and there was a lot of staff training involved. And finally then, in 2021, we had to kind of roll out the official controls and the changing of how trade flows between Ireland and the UK. And then after I had 2 years completed, I availed of the mobility scheme, and I moved to Horticulture and Plant Health Division. So I got appointed as a plant health inspector in this division also, and Deirdre gave you a background in the division there. So I am a plant health inspector. I would carry out official controls in nurseries, garden centres. I would coordinate survey work with SAO staff, carrying out surveys for diseases that we need to report to the European Commission. I would oversee eradication of outbreaks of regulated pests and diseases. It occasionally happens. We had a few last year. There's a policy element to my role also. So I will be involved in developing strategy at a national level on various projects and working groups participating. Participate in communications working groups. We prepare for Bloom, ploughing championships, that kind of thing, just to get the important message to Plant Health out. I've participated in European Commission audits. We're subject to audit by the European Commission, and also we coordinate strategy-wise with all of the other member states. There are standing committee meetings in Brussels once a month. I occasionally am required to attend. It's very interesting meeting our colleagues from the other member states. And also there are very good opportunities for professional development. There are training courses hosted by the European Commission, and I'm actually currently logged in here from a hotel room in Bern in Switzerland. I'm attending a course hosted by the European Plant Protection Organization. So basically my experience in the last few years of working in DAFM is that if you're not afraid to put your hand up and you like to work hard, loads of very interesting opportunities will come your way. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe, and safe travelling when you get out of Bern. So can I call on Colin Murtha then just to say a few words? And Colin, you better mention the National Fertiliser Database or I'll kill you. Go on ahead.
Don't worry, it's in there. Thanks very much for that, Louise. No, I said I'd start off firstly, just I graduated from UCD there in 2016 from agro-environmental science, and then joined the department three years later. Actually started at the same time as Joe, started in Horticulture Plant Health Division with vision towards Brexit preparations. Then a few months into that, a new division was formed. It was the Import Control Operation Division, and myself and Joe moved over to that. We were involved in import controls then in Dublin Port, Dublin Airport. I was based there for 2.5 years. Transition to Brexit was an interesting one, as Louise could tell you, but definitely learned a lot from it. Met a lot of very good people out there. Same as Joe, 2.5 years in, I applied for mobility. I know Bill touched on it earlier. It's a great opportunity because it allows you to, I suppose, work in different divisions across the Department of Agriculture. It gives you, I suppose, a greater idea of the work that the Department of Agriculture do when you're in these divisions as well. And it allows you to work with a large range of people and make good connections across the department as well. As Sheila said, I was brought into the feedstuff, fertiliser, grain and poultry division, with my main focus being on fertiliser. Same as going into the import control operation division, there were a lot of things happening at the time. So I was involved, as Louise said, in the National Fertiliser Database, which is still ongoing. So drawing that up, so it's pretty much just monitoring of imports coming into the country and sale of fertiliser across the country. I'm also involved in a new EU reg that only came into play when I entered into the division. That also involves liaising with other member states, meetings in Brussels, as has been mentioned this as well. Great opportunity to go over and meet people from different member states and how they're implementing the regulation in their area. I'm also involved in the sampling and testing of fertilisers, and I'm also involved in assessing new fertilisers that are coming on the market in Ireland. As I said, 2 divisions I've been involved in have been very busy, but one thing that I have noticed, that, as Joe said, if you're willing to put your hand up, work will be given to you, and it's I suppose a great opportunity to grow as well when you take these opportunities on. And I've been lucky enough to have line managers and heads of divisions that I suppose have trusted us with these responsibilities. So I know I couldn't recommend the department highly enough, really, and I've enjoyed my time in it so far. Thanks, Louise.
Well done. Thanks very much, Colin. So just in terms of concluding this presentation, so we have had, and I see in the questions, there are a number of queries regarding eligibility for an AI competition. And we're not going to deal with eligibility queries on a webinar. We'll be here until tomorrow morning. So do send them in. Some people are asking when will they get a response to that, to their eligibility query. Look, we're trying to deal with them as soon as we can, but the reality is the people who are dealing with these eligibility queries already had fairly full calendars, so they're trying to deal with them. But there are some basics in relation to the eligibility criteria, and it's very clearly set out in the competition booklet, and Joe is going to cover that. Again, Bill mentioned the closing date of the 4th of May, 3 p.m. and from my point of view, look, there's information about the department and what we do over and above what you have received here this evening on www.gov.ie/agriculture. So, Joe Byrne, can you stop sharing my screen and maybe hand over to Joe, who's going to give a kind of an overview. Joe is in our competitions section, and he's going to give you an overview on the competition process. So I'll go on mute and hide my camera. Thanks.
That's right. Thanks very much, Louise. Can you hear me there, Louise?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can.
And can you see the first page there? Can my page shown there on the screen, the Assistant Agriculture?
Yeah,
it is shown. Yeah. Okay. Hi guys. Good to meet you all. Welcome out. My name is Joe Sheridan. I'm the competitions manager here in the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. I'm just going to go through a few of the basics here for the competition process and try and talk you through the process of getting our applications in and the selection process and where queries can deal with, as Louise and Bill alluded to earlier on. So basically, anyway, first of all, as from the competitions booklet, there are certain requirements, essential requirements and qualifications that are required. And the main one there is number one there, on or before the 4th of May 2023, the qualification in agricultural science at level 8 on the national framework of qualifications with a minimum of 2.2 honours degree result. Just within that, all this information is in the competitions booklet. Please note that the level 8 agricultural science qualification must be underpinned by core sciences of biology, chemistry and physics. Mathematics will be accepted in lieu of one of the preceding 3 core subjects. So that's basically the main requirements there on the qualifications. There's other stuff there now that looking for is good IT skills, ability to work effectively as part of a team, excellent interpersonal written and communication skills, an ability to prioritize multiple responsibilities, and not on the close date, on the date of appointment, when the appointment hold a current full driver license and access to a vehicle for their own use. Now, all those qualifications are listed in the booklet, and I will get to tell you how you can any queries were already be dealt with just short at the end of my brief presentation here. The application process itself, as most people know now, the information booklet and the application form are available on the Public Jobs website. That's PATS now. So www.publicjobs.ie. This competition is being run by PAS on behalf of the department. So to apply here, you must have a registered account with Public Jobs. For those that do not, you must create a new account before proceeding. Proceed, complete the online application form as per the instructions provided by PAS. The local location preferences. Just to see a few queries down there already coming in. Candidates can select up to 2 counties from those listed in the booklet for where they be willing to accept. All information, please refer to the booklet for the full list of counties and more detailed information on the process. Just regarding the counties, you will notice that there are 22 counties listed on the application form. 4 counties are omitted because there's unlikely to be vacancies in those counties during the lifetime of this competition. There's also noted that there are 7 counties where there are current vacancies at the moment. They'll be Laois, Wexford, Kildare, Dublin, Donegal, Tipperary and Kerry. The candidates are not limited to those 7 counties. We're just highlighting that there are the 7 counties where there are current vacancies, and vacancies may arise in other locations. Very importantly, applications must be submitted by no later than 3 p.m. on Thursday, May the 4th, 2023. Late applications will not be accepted. As I said, this competition is being managed on the application side by PAS, and PAS will acknowledge receipt of your application form and will keep you updated as the competition progresses. Come 3 p.m. on that Thursday, the 4th of May, the link will be removed from the Public Jobs website. So if you're not in by 3 p.m, unfortunately, the time will have gone for your application then. The selection process. The shortlisting method will be one or a combination of the methods listed in the competition booklet, depending on the number of applications received. With that, I would stress that it's important and in your own interest to provide a detailed account of your qualifications and experience in your application. Your application form will form a good part of the assessment. Interviews. Successful candidates from the shortlisting stage will be invited forward for the competency-based interviews. Successful candidates coming from the interview stage will be placed on an order of merit from where the vacancies will be filled as they arise. It is anticipated that the first batch of interviews will commence in June 2023, and there will be further batches to follow at later dates. The order of merit will remain in place for at least 2 years from the date of appointment, and it's as per passing for the booklet, it's unlikely that appointments will be made after September 2025 on this competition. For applying for this, there are plenty of pros to apply for these posts. Department of Agriculture provides a good work-life balance. Jobs are permanent and pensionable, which in this day now is a good point now for people going for mortgages and getting loans and all that. There are great opportunities for career progression, self-development and upskilling. So there's plenty of pros for to consider, not just to consider these posts and a career in agriculture. Just regarding the clearance, appointment and queries, as vacancies arise, candidates placed on the order of merit into clearance will be placed into clearance before they are appointed. As per the competition booklet, first of all, now regarding queries, all application queries should be directed or passed by email to traylock@publicjobs.ie. That email address for Traylock is within the competition booklet, and that's just if you have any query, which if your application has been received or whatever, if they've got it, they should go to pass. Department of Agriculture will not have access to the applications. They'll all be posted with pass. Any general queries can be emailed to ourselves here in the competitions page and the competitions inbox here now in Department of Agriculture. So it's as Louise says, it's competitions@agriculture.gov.ie. There is further information on all these posts and more information on these positions and what the department does on the DFM website on gov.ie. If anyone, any queries that come in first, we will look to deal with them as quickly as possible and get the answers back to you as soon as can. We do expect a large volume of questions coming from this, so please bear with us. If you are in doubt, I would strongly recommend anyway getting your application in before the closing day, because if you miss the closing date, then you will your application will not be accepted. I'll just run through. There's a couple of small questions there that were raised, and I'll quickly answer them just for time. There's someone's asked, is the webinar being recorded? A few people asked that. Yes, the webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on the DAFM website under gov.ie over the coming days. Is there an age limit for applying? No, there's no age limit applying. Someone asked, can you apply if you don't have a level A qualification until June? Unfortunately, you need the qualifications on the closing day, which is the May the 4th. So you need to have that level A qualification by the May the 4th. The other one asked, can Department of Agriculture staff apply? Yes, they can. This is an open competition. Anyone can apply, assuming they meet the qualifications and essential requirements. And the last question there, saying when the Mr. Law class is technical or clerical, it's more class on the inspectorate side. So yeah, be more technical than clerical. I hope that explains an awful lot for yourselves on the competitions process. And like I said, any questions at all regarding qualifications, eligibilities, please post them to the competitions@agriculture.gov.ie email address, and we'll follow up. But if in doubt, I strongly recommend getting your application in before the closing day, because they will not be accepted after that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe. So just on that last point, so there was a question there, is this role classified as a technical or clerical role? As I've been told, the mobility is for clerical roles, and from experience, mobility is limited in the technical side. So this is a professional role. This is the first thing. And the department has a mobility policy, and it applies to the Agricultural Inspectorate as it does for all other employees within the department. There was a question, and I'm going to maybe ask Sheila, maybe because you have some TAOs in your division. What's the main difference between the day-to-day duties of a TAO versus an assistant agricultural inspector? And if anybody else wants to come in, I don't know who else has TAOs in their division, but Sheila definitely does. So maybe Sheila, can I ask you to take that question, please?
Yeah, well, and I suppose, Louise, the first thing to say is it depends on the person. First of all, you know that we have some TAOs within the division who have agricultural degrees, you know, who would be capable of being AIs, and some of those have taken on roles have been more traditionally done by AIs, and then they've applied for the AI competition subsequently. So just, you know, within the technical roles, I suppose really it's about responsibility and how much responsibility is placed on you in a lot of cases. You know, so you might be out doing an inspection as a technical officer, taking samples, but you wouldn't have the responsibility then of maybe making those decisions in terms of the action that would have to be taken. However, you know, as I said, many of the technical officers will really have input into those and have scientific background. I've worked in the job for a long time, so it does vary, but I suppose it's just more that a lot of them wouldn't be going to meetings, as I said, in Brussels, and wouldn't be involved in more the policy side. You know, they probably would have to take more instruction from the assistant inspectors and the inspectors in the area in terms of what they're doing. But I think, I'm not sure if that really answers it, but as I said,
I think that's fine. I think it's fine. The bottom line is we're very much a team-based organization. So you will see in the, you know, the entry requirements, you know, we really want people to work effectively as a team. And like, we have a very strong policy around equality, you know, diversity and inclusion, and we want people to be treated equally, and we want all members of the team to feel valued. So we very much have a strong, I suppose, deep-rooted public service ethos, and, you know, of fairness and impartiality and professionalism and all of those values that you would expect. And like, you know, we are a team, and actually this department really pulls together when, you know, when we have to, like at times of crisis, whether it's foot and mouth dioxin, whether it was Brexit, COVID, you name it, we put our shoulder to the wheel, and there's a real good work ethic and a good ethos within our department. Then I'm just moving on in terms of other questions. How many positions are there available? I suppose it's a moving feast because we're constantly bringing in new staff, we're recruiting AIs. We still have some people left on panels, but I would say there's in the region of around 10 to 15 posts currently vacant. But as I said, that changes all of the time. What division is located in Donegal? Well, Crop Policy Certification and Evaluation Division have a presence in Donegal, in that they're up in the Tops potato farm in Raphoe, and we do have a vacancy in Donegal. That's one of the 7 counties that are listed at the moment. I'm sure John Muldowney has some staff in Donegal, and I'm sure Integrated Controls Division have staff in Donegal. Maybe John, can you just confirm you have staff in Donegal?
At the moment, I actually don't. It's Drumshanbo would be as far as we go, but I have some technical staff that would be in the Raphoe office. But
Okay.
again, it changes from time to time depending on the distribution of work.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, John. So just regards to the preference for locations, if one listed their preference of location on their application as required, but they were better suited to a different location, perhaps a certain skill set, could this person be offered a different location? So at the moment, you select your 2 counties. If you are suited to a job in another location, you're not selected as a first point of call. But if you join the department, you have that opportunity to apply for mobility in due course. You know, you have to be in a post for at least 2 years. So we do try and skills match as best we can, but because of the requirement to try and fill vacancies in particular locations, we have had to take a location approach to this competition. We did it previously. But so in other words, if we had a number of vacancies within a location and we get 3 or 4 people through clearance, we do try to skills match the people to the posts as best we can. And then if we have a post in a county and nobody had selected that county as part of the application process, you know, at the end of the panel, we can say, okay, then we put out that job to all people to say, look, we have a post in, let's say, Sligo, and we have an office in Drumshanbo, and let's say there was a post there, we would try and fill it then, but we would always respect the order of merit. So the person that's placed highest on the panel would get precedent over somebody which is below them. Is there a choice of which section you would be placed in, or will be placed in one division? There's no choice. We can discuss with you if you get through clearance and you've been offered a post. We can discuss with you that post, but unfortunately, you know, we don't have the option of people picking and choosing divisions. We have an organisation to run, and we have to get people in and fill in the posts. And look, I have worked in numerous divisions across the department, and I learned so much. You know, I did a master's in animal nutrition. I was put into animal breeding, and I had to bring in a sheep breed improvement program from UCD that was been worked on by a postdoc out there and Professor Keller, and I had to bring that into the department. And you know, you think, geez, you're going to sink here, you know, but anyway, you manage to swim and you learn a huge amount. And as Deirdre and Bill mentioned, you know, I was put on training courses. I had to refresh my memory on all of the animal science, animal breeding that I did in final year in college. But look, there's a great support system in place, and you're able to, we'll support you in your role. If you're working in a STEMI state body, will you be on the same grade and increment in terms of salary upon joining DAFM? I'm not going to get into that. There is a policy there. We'll answer that, and I think there are some arrangements for people who are working in other semi-states to come in on the same point of the salary, but don't quote me on it, we'll answer you. Are the Kildare-based roles all based out of Back Weston? Yes. For assistant agricultural inspectors, unless some of my colleagues tell me no, but yes is the answer. We dealt with the level 8 until June. Thank you for the presentation. Would a person coming from a sales food industry be considered to be less suitable to the role compared to staff who may be applying for these positions who are currently employed by DAFM? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. People coming in from industry bring a very valuable perspective, and no is the answer. Everybody is treated the same in terms of the competition. We're an equal opportunities employer, so everybody brings a certain skill set to the table, certain skills and competencies, and we're a diverse organisation, and you know, the answer to that question is no. Will the first interview take place in Chapter House? That's too specific. Or will it be a video interview? We haven't decided definitively on the actual process, but as Joe outlined, we have various options open to us. As inspectors, are we working on all schemes, etc., or do we go out on a number of different farms to cross-check for one scheme? It depends on the division. You know, you may not be working on schemes at all. Are there options for hybrid working? Yes, we have a blended working policy within the department. At the moment, the policy is that you're required to be in 3 days a week, and you can work remotely too. And again, those policies are there for staff who join us. If selecting Dublin as a location, could you be placed in the import controls division? Yes is the answer, and if you're placed there, there's a 24-hour shift in operation, and the good news is that you get a 25% shift allowance, or whatever the shift allowance is, in that division. But you may also be placed in Ag House. Bear in mind, if you turn down an offer of a job in the port, you've turned down Dublin, so you won't get offered a post in Agriculture House. Does the department cover animal health and welfare, and if so, which department covers it? Are there AIs working in that area? So yes, we do cover animal health and welfare. We have an animal health and welfare division, and have we any AIs working in that area at the moment? No, but I suppose we engage.
Can I just add that we do? Division. Yeah, so yeah, I was just going to say that we do certain checks to do animal health and welfare in the poultry part of Feeding Stuffs division.
Yeah, where do you access the application? It's on publicjobs.ie. I live in Meath, so I list Meath and Dublin as my counties. Can I still get offered a position in Kildare? No. The current vacancies at the moment include Kildare and Dublin. If you're living in Meath, I'd be picking Dublin and Kildare because there's no jobs in Meath, and after watching them playing football on Sunday, I'm completely depressed. Our interviews in person or virtual? Well, again, the final interview will be in person. There may be some virtual aspect or may not be. We haven't decided on the shortlisting process. Can you please repeat the counties in which the vacancies currently exist? It's in the application booklet. So Laois, Wexford, Kildare, Dublin, Donegal, Tipperary and Kerry. But the vast majority of locations are going to come up in our HQ locations, which is Laois, Kildare, Dublin, Wexford.
You're frozen, Louise. Louise, we've lost you, I think, or has anybody else lost it? Maybe somebody.
Yeah, no, we all have, I think, Bill. But Bill, there was a question there which I thought was worth answering, and not for me, but I think it could be Carl, somebody else who was on the AI interviews in the past. One of the questions there is about how to prepare for the interview. And I do remember someone making the comment that, you know, like knowing about the agriculture sector in Ireland is very valuable, and that a lot of people knew about dairy and very little else. So I don't know if anyone on the call has been on a previous board.
I think a lot of people around have been on boards, but Carol, will you just give a quick, I'm conscious of time, folks. We've got a big commitment here this evening, so I am going to move on. I hear Louise talking actually, but not engaged. Carol, just a couple of pointers in terms of preparing for an interview, if you get that through that process.
Yeah, so it's a competency-based interview. So what I would say is you're required to give an example from your career history of each competency area. So be very clear in your own mind. What did you do? What did you learn from the process? And what was the outcome of the process? And you need to cover off those aspects in about 5 to 7 minutes. So you have to be very direct and very sharp. And then you do need to have a good knowledge of the broader sector and be able to go into some of the scientific and technical aspects of those. So don't come in and just give information that you might have read in the media, for example. We want you to have a deeper understanding of the issues. And if you have an opinion, be able to back that up in science and fact.
There's quite a number of questions just taking control of the chat box in terms of specific eligibility. And as Louisa said, I think they're better dealt with, not through here, but rather going directly to the competitions unit. And Joe will look after the answers there. There's also
we'll take that, Bill, yeah.
You look after those. One of the things as well, there's a couple of questions in terms of how many vacancies. And I think Louise has answered that in the round. We do have more vacancies and opportunities as headquarter posts, and there are then some that are around the country. But I do think, particularly in somebody's early career, you have to be open and flexible in terms of looking at, you know, the development and opportunities for the career. I certainly wouldn't be in the job I'm in today, but for the experiences I've gained along the way. And sometimes those are from successes, and sometimes you learn from the failures. That's the reality of all our career development and experience. It's around being exposed to different managers, different issues, different topics, and rounding out that skill set based on using the professional education and applying that to how we do our work, and I suppose supporting government for that objective. You know, I don't have the number of vacancies in specific counties or areas, so I can't really answer that. I don't know, Joe, can we give any direction in that? But
no, there are a number. I'm not sure of the numbers that are there currently at the moment, Bill. There are a number of vacancies in the 7 counties that were listed, and over the course of 2 years, there's likely to be a large number of vacancies across anyway. So again, I would encourage as many people out there, if you're thinking about this, get your application in before that closing day.
Yeah. Okay, folks, listen, I'd like to thank colleagues. We've had a lot of attendees on the webinar. I would like to thank you for the commitment in terms of participating this evening. Look, at our primary objective was to give a clear understanding of the job, of the breadth of work that's done within the department, the opportunity for career here, and not just a singular role. So from that perspective, I'd like to thank colleagues who are on the call in terms of imparting that to our assistant inspectors in terms of their own experiences. Unless there's anything more to add, I think from people around the table, I'm going to close this and wish everybody well in terms of considering an application and going into the process. And as Joe said, it's a really hard deadline. That's for fairness. It's not, there's no concessions in relation to that. It's either in within the deadline, don't leave it till the last minute. And certainly look at a lot of people who are in the industry would know people in the department, and feel free to just talk to them and get a better understanding. Okay. All right, folks. Listen, thank you very much. Thanks for the attendance and thanks to my colleagues. Best luck.